Little Rock serial stabber. On April 11, 2021, the Little Rock Police Department received a distress call from South Pulaski Street regarding a potential homicide. When they arrived at the scene, they found a middle-aged woman lying on the street with stab wounds all over her body. This woman turned out to be 41-year-old Deborah Walker. She was homeless at the time and was living on the streets when this incident happened. She was quickly taken to the hospital where medical staff discovered that she had been stabbed at least 15 times. Despite lying on the street, bleeding for what may have been hours, she miraculously survived and managed to regain consciousness the same day. Investigators also visited her in the hospital to gather any information she could provide about her attacker. Unfortunately, she was attacked somewhere between 1 and 4 a.m. It was still dark outside, and all that she saw was that her attacker was a tall, African-American male with a slender build. Now, in most other similar cases, such limited information would hardly be enough to generate any leads. But in this instance, the description Deborah provided left the investigators in disbelief. That's because her attacker's profile closely matched the perpetrator of another incident that took place about 8 months earlier in the surrounding area. The victim of that incident was 64-year-old Larry Eugene McChristian. He was living in Little Rock with his daughter Sarah, who was on probation at the time. On the 20th of August 2020, he had a medical emergency and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. He was discharged from the hospital the next morning. However, when the hospital staff tried to contact Sarah so she could pick him up, she wasn't answering her phone. So they gave Larry the information about a nearby homeless shelter and a bus token to get there. Later that day, Sarah came to the hospital looking for her father, only to learn that he'd been discharged hours ago. She then reached out to the homeless facility Larry was told about, but they didn't know anything about his whereabouts either. The only option she had was to file a missing persons report and wait for the police to find Larry. 2 days later, on the 24th of August, Sarah received the call she was waiting for. Tragically, it wasn't the news she had hoped for. According to the official report, the Little Rock Police Department found Larry's body on South Gaines Street at around 2 a.m. They identified him by the hospital discharge papers he had on him. More importantly, he had multiple stab wounds on his body and was unfortunately already dead by the time the police arrived. His death was declared a homicide, and the investigators began looking for clues almost immediately. This proved quite impossible at first, since there were no witnesses and there wasn't anything that could be used as evidence at the crime scene. However, after inspecting the surrounding houses, they had a major breakthrough. The CCTV camera outside a nearby house had captured the suspect walking down the street when suddenly he spots Larry and begins walking towards him. After committing the crime, he tries leaving the area only to stop, go back, and stab Larry one last time before fleeing. As mentioned earlier, this man matched the profile Deborah gave to the police, leading investigators to believe she was attacked by the same person. While looking into older cases, they also connected the same killer to another murder that happened in the area on September 23, 2020. The victim of this incident was 62-year-old Jeff Welch, another homeless man who was living in an abandoned home. On the morning of that day, Jeff's friend found him on the porch of his house with a stab wound on his neck. By this point, the investigators knew they were dealing with a deranged serial killer. However, just as they uncovered the connection between the three attacks, another tragedy unfolded. On April 12, 2023, a day after the attack on Deborah Walker, another one of his victims was found on the Wright Avenue overpass. The only thing in common with these 4 attacks was that they all involved homeless individuals, and they all happened between 1 and 4 a.m. There seemed to be no clear pattern on how the perpetrator selected his targets. This left the Little Rock community terrified to leave their homes, fearing they might become the next victim of the serial killer on the loose. After realizing the potential danger of this situation, LRPD began spreading awareness about the man who is now being referred to as the Little Rock Slasher. They also turned to the public to ask for any information they could provide on the matter, and even announced a $20,000 reward.
We also need your help. If you have seen anything suspicious or have surveillance cameras on your homes or businesses in this area, please contact us at 501.
Unfortunately, despite having CCTV footage of the suspect, the Little Rock Slasher was never caught. The case remains a mystery to this day. Or at least that's what the official reports say. While researching this case, I came across an Arkansas-based blog called the Snarky Media Report. The authors of this blog did their own investigation into the slasher case, and what they found was shocking to say the least. Put simply, they claim to have found the true identity of the killer after talking to multiple locals and Deborah, who, according to their blog, already knew the identity of her attacker. They also uncovered many details about this supposed killer, including his criminal record, which reveals that he has already served 2 prison terms in Arkansas for felony convictions of domestic violence. Also, his history with drug abuse and how it made him very agitated and violent. The authors of this blog also claim to have contacted the alleged killer's previous landlord, who gave them this image of the perpetrator. Which begs the question, if they know so much about the slasher, including his legal name, why didn't they give this info to the police? That's where the case goes from creepy to bizarre, since, according to them, they've already given everything they had to the relevant authorities. Despite this, the Little Rock police didn't make any progression in catching the serial killer. Snarky Media also published a video of the Little Rock mayor and police chief refusing to answer questions about the case. This seems to hint at something incredibly shady going on behind the scenes. That said, there's no way for me to confirm if the authors of the Snarky Media blog are telling the truth. For all we know, their whole investigation is made up, and this is just some random guy who has nothing to do with the 4 attacks, and it's all a ploy to make the Little Rock Police Department look bad. Most of the information they've gathered seems to check out with what's released publicly by the authorities. The only discrepancy in their investigation is the age of the suspect. Officials believe the slasher to be young, possibly in his 20s, but the authors of this blog state that the person they found was 46 years old. Unfortunately, this is where the leads end. Whether Snarky Media is telling the truth or not remains uncertain. What is certain, however, is that the case remains unsolved to this day. The Little Rock slasher is likely still out there and can continue his murder spree at any moment.